The most dangerous person in a room full of liars is usually the one nobody notices. The ballroom shimmered beneath three massive crystal chandeliers imported from Venice, their golden reflections dancing across polished marble floors like moving firelight. Waiters in black uniforms moved quietly between round tables covered in white silk cloth, while Manhattan's wealthiest guests raised champagne glasses and traded million-dollar smiles beneath the soft sound of a live piano drifting through the Grand Aurora Hotel. It was the kind of banquet where every laugh sounded practiced, every compliment sounded expensive, and every person in the room seemed desperate to be seen. Except for one woman. Evelyn Carter stood silently beside the west wall of the ballroom, balancing a silver tray against one hand while watching the room through calm gray eyes that revealed almost nothing. At first glance, she looked forgettable. Just another waitress hired to refill wine glasses and clear dessert plates before midnight. Her blonde hair was tied neatly into a low bun. Her uniform fit perfectly but carried no trace of luxury. No jewelry. No perfume strong enough to linger. No attempt to stand out. And yet there was something strangely composed about her. Something still. The kind of stillness people only notice after the noise disappears. Table 12 needs another bottle of Bordeaux. Another server whispered as she rushed past. Evelyn nodded once. No wasted movement. No irritation. She crossed the ballroom with quiet precision while guests continued talking over one another beneath the warm amber lights. Near the center stage, cameras flashed around Nathaniel Reed as if gravity itself bent toward him. CEO of Reed Global. 40 years old. Self-made billionaire. America's favorite business strategist according to Forbes 3 years in a row. His charcoal tuxedo looked perfectly tailored against his tall frame, while silver cufflinks caught the light every time he lifted his champagne glass. People orbited him constantly. Investors, politicians, media executives. Everyone wanted 30 seconds of Nathaniel Reed's attention because 30 seconds could change careers or destroy them. But tonight, Nathaniel looked exhausted. Not physically, emotionally, like a man who had spent too many years pretending expensive rooms still impressed him. Nathaniel, Victoria Hale purred beside him, resting elegant fingers lightly against his arm. The governor's office confirmed they'll support the expansion deal by Friday. Victoria looked flawless beneath the chandelier glow. Dark satin gown, diamond earrings, perfect posture. She carried herself with the polished confidence of someone who had spent her entire life inside rooms like this. Tonight mattered to her. Everyone knew Nathaniel was expected to announce their engagement before the banquet ended. Good, Nathaniel answered flatly, barely glancing up from the papers in his hand. Victoria's smile tightened almost invisibly. She hated when his attention drifted elsewhere. Then a soft clink interrupted the table. A single drop of red wine had landed near Victoria's silver clutch purse as Evelyn carefully poured another glass for one of the guests. Barely noticeable, but Victoria immediately leaned back as though someone had insulted her personally. Unbelievable, she said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. Conversation slowed. Several heads turned. Evelyn immediately set the bottle down. I apologize, ma'am. Her voice stayed calm, controlled. Victoria stared at her uniform with visible disgust. Do they not train servers anymore? Or do they just hire anyone now? A few guests laughed quietly into their drinks. Nathaniel didn't look up at first. He seemed too distracted reviewing the financial packet in front of him. But then Victoria continued. Honestly, some people simply don't belong in rooms like this. This time the silence spread farther. Slower. Like cold air entering the ballroom. Evelyn reached for a cloth and gently cleaned the edge of the table without defending herself. No apology beyond the first one. No embarrassment. No trembling hands. That was the strange part. Nathaniel finally lifted his eyes toward her. Most people reacted when humiliated publicly. Anger. Fear. Shame. Something. But Evelyn's face revealed nothing except professionalism and a quiet kind of patience that felt oddly out of place in a room obsessed with appearances. She looked almost untouched by the insult. And for reasons Nathaniel couldn't explain, that unsettled him more than if she had argued back. Victoria scoffed softly. Well, aren't you going to say anything? Evelyn folded the cloth carefully in her hands. Then she looked directly at Victoria for the first time all evening. Not aggressively. Not emotionally. Just steadily. No, ma'am, she answered softly. I don't think I need to. Something about the sentence landed strangely at the table. Small, polite, yet heavy enough to silence the laughter around them. Even the piano music suddenly felt distant. Nathaniel watched her for another second as she turned away and disappeared quietly back into the moving crowd of servers beneath the chandelier light. But before she vanished completely, he noticed one detail that stayed with him long after she walked away. Evelyn Carter never once lowered her eyes. The music resumed after a few uncomfortable seconds, but the atmosphere around the center table had already changed. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet Nathaniel Reed could feel it the same way people sense thunder before rain reaches the city. Across the ballroom, conversation slowly recovered beneath the soft piano melody, while servers carried silver trays through the sea of expensive suits and glittering jewelry. But Nathaniel's attention kept drifting away from the investors speaking beside him, back toward the woman who had refused to defend herself. You are distracted tonight, Victoria said quietly, adjusting the diamond bracelet around her wrist. Nathaniel reached for his water glass without looking at her. I am listening. No, Victoria replied with a tight smile. You are pretending to. Around them, cameras flashed again near the stage where reporters documented the charity banquet for tomorrow's business headlines. The Reed Foundation Annual Winter Gala. $100 million pledged toward education initiatives across New York State. At least that was what the banners claimed. Nathaniel stared briefly at the giant gold letters near the ballroom entrance. Everything tonight looked immaculate. Designed. Perfect. Yet for some reason, the room suddenly felt artificial to him. Like every person inside was rehearsing a role they had memorized years ago. Sir. Daniel Brooks leaned slightly toward him. Nathaniel's assistant always appeared calm even under pressure, but tonight his voice carried unusual tension. The Westbridge investors want to discuss the acquisition timeline before the announcement. Nathaniel nodded once. 5 minutes. Daniel hesitated. There is also an issue with the donor registry. What kind of issue? Some signatures are missing from the final transfer packet. Victoria sighed impatiently before Daniel could continue. Then have legal handle it. We are in the middle of an event, not an accounting seminar. Daniel lowered his eyes immediately. Nathaniel noticed that. People always lowered their eyes around Victoria eventually. It was one of the reasons she thrived in elite circles. She understood pressure, how to create it, how to use it, how to make weaker personalities disappear beneath it. Nathaniel used to admire that quality. Tonight, he was not so sure. Near the ballroom entrance, Evelyn quietly exchanged empty champagne glasses for fresh ones while another waitress whispered beside her. I cannot believe Victoria said that to you. Evelyn continued arranging the glasses evenly across the tray. It is fine. No, it is not. Everybody heard her. Everybody forgot already. The younger waitress frowned. How are you so calm? Evelyn paused briefly. Her pale gray eyes lifted toward the ballroom crowd moving beneath the chandeliers. Because people usually reveal themselves when they think there are no consequences. The other waitress blinked uncertainly, unsure how to respond. Evelyn simply walked away before she could ask anything else. Nathaniel noticed her again almost immediately. Not because she was loud. The opposite. She moved through the ballroom like silence itself. Efficient. Controlled. Invisible whenever she wanted to be. Yet impossible to completely ignore once noticed. At table 14, two executives laughed too loudly while sliding a sealed envelope beneath a menu. Evelyn saw it. Near the stage, a politician discreetly exchanged a flash drive with one of Victoria's financial consultants. Evelyn saw that too. At the back corner bar, a donor quietly asked the bartender whether the offshore transfer had already cleared before midnight. Evelyn heard every word while refilling water glasses nearby, but her expression never changed. She simply continued working. Calm. Watching. Nathaniel loosened his tie slightly as another investor launched into a long speech about market expansion in Singapore. Normally, he dominated these conversations effortlessly. Tonight he could barely focus. His attention kept catching strange fragments around the room. Nervous glances. Forced smiles. Quiet whispers ending abruptly whenever someone approached. And somehow Evelyn Carter seemed connected to all of it without speaking at all. Victoria leaned closer beside him. The media team wants us together near the stage in 20 minutes. Nathaniel nodded absent-mindedly. Fine. Victoria studied him carefully. You were still thinking about the waitress. Nathaniel finally looked at her directly. No, I am thinking about why everyone in this room suddenly feels nervous. Victoria laughed softly. Because wealthy people are always nervous. That is how they stay wealthy. Nathaniel almost smiled. Almost. Then his eyes drifted again toward Evelyn as she stopped briefly near the east hallway beside the ballroom kitchen doors. One of the hotel managers handed her a small black folder. She opened it only for a second before freezing almost imperceptibly. Not fear. Recognition. Nathaniel noticed because he had spent 20 years building an empire by reading tiny reactions nobody else saw. Evelyn quickly closed the folder and handed it back without saying a word. But something had changed in her eyes now. Something colder. Across the ballroom, thunder rolled faintly outside the hotel windows. Rain streaked softly against the glass overlooking Manhattan while the city lights blurred beneath the storm. Inside the ballroom, the piano continued playing. Silverware clinked softly against china. Expensive laughter floated through the air like perfume. Yet underneath it all, tension was beginning to spread quietly from table to table. Nathaniel could feel it, like cracks forming beneath polished marble. Then Evelyn crossed directly behind his chair carrying another tray of champagne glasses. For half a second, she slowed beside him. Just enough for her voice to reach only him. You should check the donor signatures before midnight, Mr. Reed. Nathaniel turned sharply, but she was already walking away again into the crowd before he could answer. Calm, silent, untouchable. Nathaniel Reed stared toward the ballroom crowd long after Evelyn disappeared into it. Around him, crystal glasses continued clinking beneath the chandelier light, while wealthy donors laughed too loudly at jokes nobody truly found funny. But her sentence remained lodged in his mind with uncomfortable precision. You should check the donor signatures before midnight. Not please. Not I think. She had spoken like someone who already knew what he would find. Daniel stepped closer again, lowering his voice carefully. Sir, the transfer documents are still waiting upstairs in the executive lounge. Nathaniel looked away from the ballroom for the first time in nearly 20 minutes. Who handled the final verification? Victoria's finance team reviewed everything this afternoon. Nathaniel's jaw tightened slightly. And legal? They signed off after the review. Victoria set her champagne glass down with controlled irritation. Nathaniel, this is becoming ridiculous. We are talking about paperwork during a charity gala. Paperwork built this company, Nathaniel answered calmly. And bad paperwork destroys it. Victoria forced another polished smile for nearby guests, but her eyes cooled noticeably. You are letting one waitress get inside your head. Nathaniel stood slowly from the table, adjusting his tuxedo jacket with quiet precision. No, he said. I am listening to my instincts. Without another word, he walked away from the ballroom toward the private elevator near the north hallway. Daniel followed immediately, while two security staff stepped aside to clear the path. Behind them, whispers spread almost instantly between guests. People always noticed when powerful men changed direction unexpectedly. Inside the mirrored elevator, silence settled heavily between Nathaniel and Daniel as the floor numbers climbed upward. Rain tapped softly against the glass exterior of the hotel, while Manhattan glowed below like scattered gold beneath the storm clouds. Do you trust Victoria? Nathaniel asked suddenly. Daniel looked startled by the question. Sir, it is a simple question. Daniel hesitated carefully. I trust the company. Nathaniel almost smiled at that. Safe answer. Corporate answer. The kind of answer employees gave when they feared honesty might cost them something. The elevator doors opened onto the executive level. Thick carpets muted every footstep, while warm wall sconces cast soft amber light along the hallway. Nathaniel entered the private conference lounge and immediately noticed the folders stacked neatly across the mahogany table. Transfer records, donor contracts, offshore funding approvals, everything prepared for tomorrow morning's press release. Daniel handed him the final signature packet. These are the verified copies. Nathaniel opened the folder slowly. At first glance, everything appeared perfect. Clean signatures, correct dates, official seals. But then he noticed something small. Too small for most people to care about. 3 signatures carried identical pressure patterns beneath the ink. Same slant, same pen angle, same unnatural hesitation near the final letter. Forged. Nathaniel's expression darkened almost imperceptibly. He flipped through more pages. Another repeated pattern. Then another. By the sixth document, cold realization settled heavily into his chest. Someone inside his own organization had fabricated donor approvals worth nearly $80 million. Daniel stared at him carefully. Sir. Nathaniel closed the folder slowly. Get me the original submission logs. Daniel immediately crossed toward the secure laptop station near the window. Outside, thunder rolled softly over Manhattan again while rain streaked across the glass. Nathaniel remained perfectly still beside the conference table, but inside, something had begun shifting violently beneath years of control. This was not random corruption. This required planning, access, trust, which meant somebody close to him had orchestrated it. Very close. Downstairs, the banquet continued glowing beneath chandeliers while cameras flashed around smiling politicians and celebrity donors. Evelyn Carter moved silently between tables carrying a tray of untouched champagne flutes. She watched a senator laugh beside a hedge fund manager moments after privately discussing hidden accounts near the hallway. She watched Victoria greeting reporters with graceful confidence while quietly checking her phone every 30 seconds. Nervous. Evelyn noticed that too. Near the ballroom entrance, one of the younger hotel staff whispered anxiously toward her. Something is happening upstairs. Security just locked the executive floor. Evelyn placed another glass carefully onto a passing tray. I know. How? Evelyn looked toward the ballroom stage where Victoria now smiled confidently beneath television lights. Because people become careless when they think they already won. Upstairs, Daniel finally looked up from the laptop screen with visible concern. The originals were modified at 6:14 this evening. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. By who? Daniel swallowed once before answering. The authorization came from Victoria Hale's executive clearance. Silence filled the room completely. Not dramatic. Not explosive. Worse. Controlled. Heavy. Nathaniel walked slowly toward the rain-covered windows overlooking Manhattan. 20 years building Reed Global. 20 years learning how greed hides behind polished smiles and expensive handshakes. Yet somehow he had almost missed it happening beside him. Behind him, Daniel spoke carefully. There is more. Nathaniel turned slightly. What? Daniel hesitated. The forged transfers connect to shell foundations tied to several guests downstairs tonight. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. Suddenly the ballroom below made sense. The nervous laughter. The private exchanges. The forced smiles. It was not a celebration. It was a performance. And somewhere in the middle of it all stood a quiet waitress who had seen the truth before he did. Nathaniel opened his eyes again slowly. Calmly. But Daniel noticed something dangerous in them now. Not anger. Clarity. Seal every financial server immediately, Nathaniel said quietly. Nobody leaves the hotel until I understand exactly how deep this goes. Then he picked up his phone and stared at the banquet photo scheduled for tomorrow's headlines. Nathaniel Reed beside Victoria Hale, smiling beneath crystal chandeliers while corruption sat hidden inches from their hands. For the first time all night, Nathaniel no longer felt distracted. He felt awake. Downstairs, nobody knew the night had already begun collapsing. The ballroom still glowed beneath crystal chandeliers, while photographers captured smiling faces beside gold-trimmed tables covered in untouched desserts and melting candlelight. A jazz pianist played softly near the stage, filling the room with elegant music that almost disguised the tension quietly spreading through the air. Almost. Evelyn Carter stepped through the crowd carrying a fresh tray of champagne flutes balanced carefully against one hand. Her movements remained smooth, precise, invisible, but her eyes missed nothing. Near table 6, a real estate developer whispered angrily into his phone before abruptly hanging up when security walked past. At the donor table near the windows, two executives exchanged nervous glances every time the elevator doors opened across the ballroom. Something was changing. They could feel it, even if they did not yet understand why. Miss Carter. Evelyn stopped as the hotel manager hurried toward her with visible stress tightening his face. Yes. Have you seen Victoria Hale? Evelyn gently set two glasses onto a passing tray before answering. Not recently. The manager lowered his voice. Security just requested access to all ballroom surveillance footage. Evelyn's expression never shifted. Then I suggest you cooperate. The manager stared at her strangely for a second. There was something unsettling about the way she spoke tonight. Calm. Certain. like someone already standing at the end of a story nobody else had finished reading yet. Across the ballroom, Victoria stood beneath television lights, speaking confidently with reporters from two business networks. Her smile remained flawless, but inside, pressure had begun tightening around her chest. Nathaniel had not returned her calls for nearly 20 minutes. Daniel Brooks had disappeared completely, and now security teams were quietly repositioning themselves near the exits. Victoria noticed details faster than most people. It was how she survived in elite circles. "Miss Hale," one reporter asked brightly, "is tonight's engagement announcement still happening before midnight?" Victoria laughed softly for the cameras. Nathaniel prefers surprises. But behind the polished smile, her fingers tightened almost invisibly around the stem of her champagne glass. Something was wrong. Then she saw Evelyn crossing the ballroom again. Their eyes met briefly through the moving crowd. Victoria felt irritation flare instantly. The waitress looked too calm. Most people became nervous when powerful people grew uncomfortable. Evelyn seemed steadier, as though discomfort itself no longer affected her. Victoria excused herself from the reporters and walked directly toward her in sharp silver heels clicking softly against the marble floor. "You," she said coldly once they stood near the hallway entrance away from cameras. Evelyn stopped politely. "Ma'am, what exactly did you say to Nathaniel earlier?" "Nothing important." Victoria stepped closer. "Do not play games with me." Evelyn held the tray, perfectly still in her hands. "I work here to serve guests." "You are a waitress," Victoria snapped quietly. "Do not confuse attention with importance." Nearby conversations softened slightly as guests sensed tension without hearing the words clearly. Evelyn remained silent for a moment. Then she answered gently, "Important people usually do not need to remind others they are important." Victoria's expression hardened instantly. "Careful. I am." That calmness again. That unbearable calmness. Victoria suddenly understood why Nathaniel kept noticing her. Evelyn did not react like ordinary people. She absorbed pressure without bending beneath it. And people like Victoria hated what they could not control. Before she could respond, the ballroom lights flickered once. Softly, then steadied again. Several guests looked upward nervously while whispers spread between tables. Moments later, two additional security officers entered through the north hallway carrying tablets and sealed folders. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Laughter weakened. Smiles looked forced now. Nathaniel Reed finally re-entered the ballroom from the executive elevator with Daniel Brooks beside him. Conversations began dying almost instantly around the room. Nathaniel walked differently now. Slower, colder, awake. The easy charm executives usually wore during public events had vanished completely from his face. Victoria felt genuine fear for the first time that evening. She moved quickly toward him, forcing composure back into her voice. "Nathaniel, what is going on?" Nathaniel looked at her quietly for several long seconds before answering. "That depends." "On what?" "Whether you plan on telling me the truth before I uncover the rest myself." Silence spread outward from them like a wave moving through the ballroom. Nearby guests pretended not to listen while listening to every word. Victoria laughed carefully. "I have no idea what you are talking about." Nathaniel turned toward Daniel. "Lock every financial account connected to tonight's donor transfers." Several guests visibly froze. One man near the stage nearly dropped his drink. Victoria lowered her voice sharply. "Nathaniel, this is not the place for theatrics." "No," Nathaniel answered calmly. "This was the place for lies." Across the room, Evelyn stood quietly beside the champagne station, watching everything unfold beneath the chandelier light. No satisfaction crossed her face. No revenge. Only stillness. Nathaniel noticed her immediately, even through the crowded ballroom. For one strange second, the noise around him disappeared completely. The reporters, the guests, the music, all of it faded beneath one realization. She had known. Not guessed. Known. Victoria followed his line of sight toward Evelyn, and suddenly her expression changed. Recognition flickered behind her eyes. Small. Fast. But Nathaniel saw it. Years in business had taught him one thing above all others. Truth often appeared for less than a second before fear buried it again. "You know her," Nathaniel said quietly. Victoria recovered instantly. Of course not. But Nathaniel was already walking across the ballroom toward Evelyn while hundreds of eyes silently tracked him beneath the glowing chandeliers. And for the first time all evening, the most powerful man in the room was not walking toward a politician, an investor, or a camera. He was walking toward the waitress everyone else had underestimated. Nathaniel Reed crossed the ballroom slowly while conversations dissolved around him like smoke. Every guest watched him now. Investors lowered their glasses halfway to their lips. Politicians suddenly became fascinated by their phones. Reporters sensed something breaking beneath the polished surface of the evening and subtly repositioned themselves closer to the center of the room. The piano music continued softly near the stage, but even the pianist seemed uncertain now, his hands hesitating slightly over the keys. Evelyn Carter stood beside the champagne station beneath a wall of mirrored glass, calmly replacing empty flutes with fresh ones as though nothing unusual was happening. Nathaniel stopped a few feet away from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The ballroom lights reflected softly across the marble floor between them while rain streaked the massive windows overlooking Manhattan. "Who are you?" Nathaniel finally asked quietly. Evelyn adjusted the alignment of two champagne glasses before answering. "Someone who pays attention." "That is not an answer. It is the only one that matters tonight." Nathaniel studied her face carefully. Up close, she looked even calmer than before. No fear, no excitement, no satisfaction at watching powerful people unravel around her. Only restraint, as though she had learned long ago that emotions often distracted people from seeing clearly. "You knew the signatures were forged," Nathaniel said. "Yes." "How?" Evelyn glanced briefly across the ballroom toward Victoria, who now stood frozen near the stage surrounded by nervous reporters and silent donors. "Because people become careless when they think nobody important is watching." Nathaniel followed her gaze. "And you were watching?" "I have been watching all night." Nearby guests pretended not to listen while inching closer anyway. Nathaniel noticed that too. Wealthy people loved scandals as long as they were not standing at the center of them. "Did Victoria involve you somehow?" he asked. "No, then why are you here?" Evelyn looked at him directly for the first time since he approached her. Her gray eyes remained steady beneath the chandelier glow. "Because some truths deserve witnesses." Before Nathaniel could answer, one of the security officers approached Daniel Brooks near the ballroom entrance and handed him a tablet. Daniel's expression changed instantly as he scanned the screen. Concern, then disbelief, then something heavier. He walked quickly toward Nathaniel. "Sir," he said quietly, "we found deleted transfer records connected to the Hale Foundation." Victoria stepped forward immediately. "Nathaniel, this is absurd." Her voice remained elegant, but cracks had begun forming beneath the control. "You cannot seriously investigate me based on accounting errors and the word of a waitress." Evelyn said nothing. Nathaniel slowly turned toward Victoria. "Accounting errors do not reroute $80 million into shell accounts." Several gasps quietly spread through the ballroom. Cameras began rising discreetly between guests despite hotel staff asking reporters not to record. Victoria forced a sharp laugh. "You are humiliating me publicly over incomplete information." Nathaniel's expression remained unreadable. "Then explain the forged signatures." Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came immediately. That hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds. Yet in rooms like this, 2 seconds could destroy reputations built over decades. Evelyn quietly picked up another tray beside her, as though the entire confrontation had nothing to do with her. Nathaniel noticed that. She never inserted herself emotionally into the chaos. She simply stood beside it while truth exposed people on its own. Victoria suddenly pointed toward Evelyn with visible frustration. "This woman is manipulating you." Several heads turned instantly. Evelyn remained still. She has been moving around all night listening to private conversations. She clearly planned something. Nathaniel looked back toward Evelyn. "Did you?" "No," Evelyn answered softly. "I only listened while everyone else talked too much." Silence settled again. Heavy now. The kind of silence that makes people hear their own conscience more clearly than surrounding noise. Victoria's composure finally began slipping. "Who even are you?" she snapped toward Evelyn. "You walk in here wearing a server uniform, and suddenly everyone acts like you matter." Evelyn lowered the tray gently onto the counter beside her. Then she answered with the same calm voice that somehow sounded louder than shouting. "No, ma'am. Everyone acts nervous because the truth matters." The ballroom froze completely. Even the piano stopped. Somewhere near the back entrance, thunder rolled faintly beyond the rain-covered windows. Nathaniel stared at Evelyn without blinking. Not because of the sentence itself, because she believed it completely. Most people in rooms like this performed confidence. Evelyn carried conviction. Quiet. Unshakable. Daniel stepped closer again beside Nathaniel. There is something else, he murmured carefully. The surveillance team recovered footage from the executive hallway. Victoria visibly stiffened. Nathaniel noticed immediately. Show me. Daniel turned the tablet screen toward him. The video displayed a timestamp from earlier that evening. Victoria entering the executive lounge alone with 2 finance consultants. One consultant carried the donor files. 20 minutes later, they exited separately without the originals. Nathaniel's jaw tightened slowly. Around them, whispers spread faster now between tables. People were beginning to distance themselves physically from Victoria. Chairs shifted. Conversations died. Nobody wanted proximity to collapse. Victoria looked around the ballroom and finally realized something terrifying. The room no longer belonged to her. Not the cameras. Not the guests. Not even Nathaniel. Power had shifted quietly while she was too focused on appearances to notice. And somehow the shift began the moment she mocked the woman nobody considered important enough to fear. Evelyn picked up the tray again calmly. Your guests still need champagne, she said softly toward another nervous waitress nearby. Nathaniel almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The ballroom was imploding beneath corruption scandals and shattered alliances while Evelyn Carter continued acting like professionalism still mattered. Maybe that was what unsettled him most. She still believed in dignity inside a room that had almost forgotten the word existed. Then Victoria looked directly at Evelyn again, and this time her voice carried something new beneath the anger. Recognition. I know you, she whispered. Nathaniel turned sharply. Evelyn remained silent. Victoria's expression slowly drained of color beneath the chandelier light. You are Thomas Carter's daughter. And suddenly the entire ballroom felt colder. The silence after Victoria's words felt heavier than thunder. Thomas Carter's daughter. The sentence moved through the ballroom faster than any whisper could. Several older executives immediately looked away. A few donors exchanged tense glances filled with recognition they wished they could hide. Nathaniel Reed stood completely still beneath the chandelier light, his eyes fixed on Evelyn as pieces of a forgotten past slowly began rearranging themselves inside his mind. Thomas Carter. The name had not been spoken inside Reed Global for nearly 12 years. Not publicly. Not comfortably. Evelyn did not react immediately. She simply looked at Victoria with the same quiet composure she had carried all evening. But something colder now lived beneath it. Not anger. Memory. Victoria realized too late that she had exposed something bigger than herself. You know her father? Nathaniel asked quietly. Victoria swallowed once before answering. He worked in corporate compliance years ago. Worked? Evelyn finally spoke. Until your board blamed him for financial discrepancies he tried to report. The room grew still again. Even the reporters stopped typing. Nathaniel's expression hardened slightly. What discrepancies? Evelyn looked toward the rain-covered windows before answering. Shell charities. Altered transfers. Hidden accounts. Her eyes returned calmly to Victoria. Very similar to tonight. Victoria immediately shook her head. That is not what happened. No. Evelyn asked softly. Then tell them what did happen. Victoria opened her mouth but hesitated again. Nathaniel noticed every hesitation now. Every pause. Every crack in confidence. It was astonishing how quickly trust collapsed once doubt entered the room. Daniel Brooks quietly stepped closer beside Nathaniel. Sir, I checked archived records after hearing the name. Thomas Carter filed 3 internal warnings before resigning. Evelyn's voice remained calm. He did not resign. Daniel looked uncomfortable. The official record says he stepped down voluntarily. Evelyn almost smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Official records say many convenient things. Nearby guests shifted uneasily beneath the chandeliers. Some recognized the story now. Years ago, Reed Global survived a minor compliance scandal that disappeared almost overnight. A middle-level compliance officer accepted responsibility. The media cycle moved on within days. Nobody important suffered consequences. That was how elite scandals usually worked. Nathaniel stared at Evelyn carefully. Your father was blamed for corruption he tried to expose. Yes. And you came here tonight for revenge. Evelyn shook her head slowly. No, Nathaniel frowned slightly. Then why? For the first time all evening, emotion flickered faintly across Evelyn's face. Not rage. Sadness. Quiet and exhausted. Because my father spent the last years of his life watching dishonest people become celebrated while truthful people disappeared. Her fingers tightened slightly around the silver tray in her hands. He used to say corruption survives because respectable people become too comfortable looking away. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Somewhere near the back of the ballroom, a champagne glass trembled softly against marble before settling again. Victoria crossed her arms tightly. You expect everyone to believe this story because you worked one banquet and overheard conversations. No, Evelyn answered softly. I expected nobody to listen at all. That sentence landed harder than shouting ever could. Nathaniel felt it immediately, because she was right. If she had walked into the ballroom earlier dressed as an attorney or executive, people would have listened carefully. But as a waitress, she became invisible, and invisible people heard everything. Nathaniel looked around the ballroom slowly now. Investors avoiding eye contact. Politicians quietly moving toward exits. Donors pretending to check messages while calculating damage control. The room had transformed completely in less than an hour. The performance was over. And somehow the woman everyone dismissed had become the only person standing there without pretending to be something else. Why did you not come directly to me? Nathaniel asked quietly. Evelyn met his gaze steadily. Would you have listened? Nathaniel said nothing, because both of them already knew the answer. No, he would not have. Not before tonight. Not before seeing forged signatures with his own eyes. Not before watching powerful people panic the moment truth approached them. Victoria suddenly stepped forward again, desperation finally breaking through the elegance. Nathaniel, you cannot seriously destroy everything over accusations from someone emotionally connected to the situation. Emotionally connected? Evelyn repeated softly. My father died believing honesty ruined his life. Victoria's face tightened. I am sorry for what happened to him, but business decisions are complicated. Evelyn stared at her quietly for several long seconds. Then she asked one simple question. Did you know the signatures were forged? Victoria froze. That tiny hesitation again. Small. Fatal. Nathaniel looked away from her immediately after seeing it. He did not need the answer anymore. He already had it. Security officers quietly entered the ballroom perimeter while hotel staff nervously dimmed media access near the stage. Outside, rain continued sliding down the enormous windows overlooking Manhattan. Inside, the warmth of the ballroom suddenly felt artificial. Heavy, like oxygen disappearing slowly from the room. Nathaniel stepped closer toward Evelyn. You stayed silent all night. Evelyn nodded once. People reveal themselves faster when they think nobody is judging them. Nathaniel looked around the ballroom again. The whispered conversations. The frightened faces. The polished reputations cracking beneath pressure. Then back at Evelyn Carter, standing calmly in a black server uniform while the powerful unraveled around her. And now, he asked quietly. Evelyn lowered her eyes briefly toward the tray in her hands before answering. Now they know somebody was. No one in the ballroom touched their champagne anymore. The glasses remained scattered across white tablecloths beneath the chandeliers, untouched and slowly warming beneath the golden lights. Conversations had disappeared completely now, replaced by the kind of silence that only exists when powerful people realize they are no longer controlling the room. Nathaniel Reed stood facing Evelyn Carter while rain slid endlessly down the enormous windows behind them. Somewhere near the stage, reporters whispered urgently into phones while hotel security quietly blocked additional media from entering the ballroom. But Nathaniel barely noticed any of it. His attention remained fixed on the woman standing calmly in front of him. You knew all of this before tonight, he said quietly. Evelyn nodded once. Most of it. How long? Long enough to understand patterns. Nathaniel studied her carefully. You investigated my company alone? No, her voice remained soft. I simply stopped ignoring what everyone else ignored. Nearby, Victoria Hale stood frozen beside the donor tables while several former allies slowly distanced themselves from her. Nobody wanted to stand too close to collapsing power. It was one of the oldest instincts in rooms like this. Survival disguised as professionalism. Victoria noticed it happening in real time. The senator who had spent an hour praising her suddenly stepped away to answer a phone call that did not exist. A hedge fund executive quietly avoided eye contact altogether. Even the reporters had shifted their attention completely toward Nathaniel and Evelyn now. Victoria's perfect social gravity was disappearing by the minute. "Nathaniel," she said sharply, forcing confidence back into her voice, "this needs to stop now." Nathaniel turned toward her slowly. "Does it? You are destroying your company publicly over accusations and old resentment." Evelyn remained silent. Nathaniel noticed that too. She never interrupted people while they exposed themselves. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice carefully. "Think clearly for one moment. Investors are watching. The board is watching. If you continue this tonight, every network in America will tear Reed Global apart by morning." Nathaniel looked around the ballroom. At the frightened executives, the nervous donors, the polished faces suddenly drained of certainty. Then he looked back toward Victoria. "Maybe it deserves to be torn apart." The sentence hit the room like shattered glass. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. "You cannot mean that." Nathaniel's expression remained calm. "I built this company believing integrity mattered more than appearance." He glanced briefly toward Evelyn. "Tonight, I realized appearance won." Silence again. Heavy. Absolute. One of the older board members near the back table finally cleared his throat nervously. "Nathaniel, perhaps this discussion should continue privately." Nathaniel did not even look toward him. Corruption became possible because too many conversations stayed private. The board member lowered his eyes immediately. Evelyn quietly lifted an abandoned champagne flute from a nearby table and placed it back onto her tray with gentle precision. Nathaniel watched the movement for a second. Such a small action, yet somehow it grounded the entire room. While everyone else panicked, calculated, defended, and lied, she simply continued behaving with dignity. "Miss Carter," one reporter finally asked carefully from near the stage, "did you come here intending to expose Reed Global publicly?" Several cameras immediately turned toward her. Evelyn paused briefly before answering. "No. Then why attend the banquet at all?" She looked toward the rain beyond the ballroom windows. Manhattan shimmered below beneath the storm like scattered light underwater. "Because my father spent years believing silence protected powerful people." Her voice remained steady. "I wanted to see if anyone powerful still recognized the truth when it stood directly in front of them." Nathaniel lowered his eyes briefly after hearing that. Something painful moved across his face. Not because she insulted him, because she had not. The worst part was that she sounded disappointed instead of angry, as though she once hoped men like him would choose differently. Daniel Brooks suddenly approached quickly from the executive hallway carrying another sealed folder. "Sir," he said quietly, "forensic accounting confirmed the offshore transfers." Nathaniel took the folder slowly. "All of them?" Daniel nodded once. "There are at least 9 executives connected so far." A ripple of panic quietly spread through the ballroom. One donor immediately grabbed his coat. Another began texting furiously beneath the table. Victoria closed her eyes briefly as though calculating damage faster than emotion could reach her. Nathaniel opened the folder and scanned several pages silently. Then he looked up again. Colder now. Clearer. "Contact federal investigators," he said to Daniel. The room erupted instantly. Not loudly. Worse. Controlled chaos. Urgent whispers. Frightened movement. Expensive people trying desperately not to appear frightened. Victoria stepped toward Nathaniel in disbelief. "You are bringing federal investigators into your own gala?" Nathaniel closed the folder carefully. No, he looked directly at her. "You did." For a moment, Victoria looked genuinely lost. Not defeated yet. Just unable to comprehend how quickly control had abandoned her. Then her eyes shifted back toward Evelyn again. Hatred flickered there now beneath the panic. "You planned this." Evelyn met her gaze calmly. "No, ma'am." She gently placed the tray down beside the champagne station. "You planned this. I only stopped pretending not to see it." Nathaniel exhaled slowly. Around him, the ballroom no longer resembled a celebration. It looked like the aftermath of illusion. Decorations remained beautiful. Music still played softly from hidden speakers. Candlelight still reflected against polished marble floors. But the performance had ended. And for the first time in years, Nathaniel Reed understood something simple and devastating. The most honest person in the ballroom had been the woman carrying the drinks. The ballroom slowly began emptying beneath the chandeliers, but nobody left with dignity anymore. Guests who had arrived smiling beside cameras now avoided eye contact while quietly gathering coats and phones from the tables. Expensive shoes crossed polished marble floors faster than before. Politicians whispered to attorneys. Executives stepped into corners searching for signals strong enough to reach crisis management teams. The atmosphere no longer resembled a charity gala. It resembled the final minutes before a storm fully arrived. Nathaniel Reed stood near the center of the ballroom, watching it all unravel in complete silence. 12 years building a reputation. 12 years believing control meant strength. And tonight, a woman carrying champagne trays had exposed how fragile that control really was. Across the room, federal investigators had already begun arriving through the north entrance accompanied by hotel security. No handcuffs, no dramatic scenes. Only quiet conversations and sealed evidence folders passing carefully between serious people who understood the weight of public scandal. Wealthy rooms rarely collapsed loudly. They collapsed politely. Victoria Hale remained near the stage beneath the fading television lights, her expression composed by force alone. The confidence that once made her magnetic now looked brittle beneath the pressure. Several board members avoided standing beside her completely. One donor quietly removed his foundation pin before slipping out through a side exit. Nathaniel noticed every detail. He always had. The difference tonight was that he finally understood what those details meant. Daniel Brooks approached carefully beside him. "Most of the media has been escorted outside," he said quietly. Nathaniel nodded once. "And the guests?" "Half already left." Daniel hesitated before continuing. "The investigators would like private access to the executive lounge." Nathaniel looked toward the ballroom windows where rain still streaked endlessly across the glass. Manhattan shimmered below in blurred gold and silver beneath the storm clouds. "Give them everything," he answered calmly. Daniel studied him for a second. "Sir, are you certain?" Nathaniel almost smiled. Not because anything felt amusing. Because certainty suddenly felt simpler than denial. "That company survived too long protecting appearances," he said quietly. "I am done protecting appearances." Daniel lowered his eyes respectfully before walking away. Near the champagne station, Evelyn Carter carefully folded a white linen cloth beside the remaining untouched glasses. Most of the hotel staff had stopped pretending to work now. They simply watched her discreetly from across the ballroom with expressions somewhere between confusion and admiration. Earlier tonight, she had been invisible to everyone here. Now nobody could stop looking at her. Nathaniel slowly walked toward her again. The noise of the ballroom seemed distant around them. "Softer now. Tired. You could have destroyed me tonight," he said quietly once he reached her. Evelyn continued folding the cloth neatly before answering. "No, you exposed corruption inside my company. Your company exposed itself." Nathaniel exhaled slowly through his nose. Again with that impossible calmness. No hatred. No satisfaction. Just truth delivered without decoration. Most people would call that revenge. Evelyn finally looked up at him. "Revenge is loud." Her gray eyes held steady beneath the chandelier light. This was accountability. Nathaniel lowered his gaze briefly. Somewhere behind them, investigators quietly escorted two financial consultants toward a private conference room while reporters waited outside behind hotel barriers. The storm outside intensified, rain tapping harder now against the massive windows. "Did your father hate me?" Nathaniel asked suddenly. Evelyn looked surprised by the question. Not offended, just surprised. She thought for several seconds before answering. "No." Nathaniel frowned slightly. "After what happened, he blamed systems more than people." Her fingers rested lightly against the folded cloth in her hands. "He used to say powerful men become dangerous when nobody around them risks telling the truth." Nathaniel absorbed the sentence silently. Because deep down, he knew exactly how true it was. Success had insulated him for years. Wealth made honesty rare. Fear made honesty disappear completely. And somewhere along the way, Reed Global stopped being built on integrity and started being built on protection. Protection of image. Protection of influence. Protection of people who looked successful while hollowing everything underneath. "I should have seen it," Nathaniel admitted quietly. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "Most people do not see what benefits them." The sentence should have sounded cruel. Somehow it did not. It sounded tired instead. Honest. Nathaniel glanced toward Victoria, standing alone near the stage, while attorneys quietly surrounded her now. For the first time all evening, she looked small. Not powerless. Just alone. Did you come tonight hoping she would suffer? Nathaniel asked. Evelyn looked toward Victoria briefly before answering. No, then what did you want? A long silence passed between them while rain continued sliding across the glass walls surrounding the ballroom. Finally, Evelyn answered softly. I wanted someone powerful to choose the truth before they were forced to. Nathaniel felt that sentence settle heavily inside him. Because she had given him chances all night. Small chances. Quiet warnings. Opportunities to pay attention before collapse arrived publicly. She never attacked him directly. She waited to see whether he would recognize integrity on his own. And somehow that hurt more than anger would have. Nearby, the pianist quietly closed the lid over the grand piano. The music was over. Hotel staff began extinguishing candles table by table, leaving sections of the ballroom dimmer with every passing minute. The glamorous illusion of the evening was disappearing piece by piece. Nathaniel looked around slowly. Half-empty glasses. Abandoned napkins. Chairs pushed back carelessly by guests who fled too quickly to remain elegant. Earlier tonight this room had felt untouchable. Now it looked fragile. Human. Real. Evelyn removed the black name tag from her uniform slowly. Nathaniel noticed her fingers pause briefly over the engraved letters before she placed it gently onto the marble counter beside the champagne station. Are you leaving? He asked quietly. Evelyn nodded once. There is nothing left for me here. Nathaniel looked at the small name tag resting beneath the chandelier glow. Evelyn Carter. Such an ordinary little piece of plastic. Yet somehow it carried more honesty than everyone else in the ballroom combined. Miss Carter. She turned slightly toward him. Nathaniel hesitated. For perhaps the first time in years, words did not come easily to him. Finally he spoke softly. I am sorry. Evelyn studied him quietly for a moment. Then she answered with the gentlest sentence he had heard all night. You noticing the truth matters more than your apology. By 1:30 in the morning, the Grand Aurora Ballroom barely resembled the glittering celebration it had been only hours earlier. Most of the candles had burned low. Half the chandeliers were dimmed now, their golden light softer against the empty tables and abandoned champagne glasses scattered across white linen cloths. Hotel staff moved quietly through the room collecting plates no one finished and folding chairs guests had left behind too quickly to care about appearances anymore. Outside, Manhattan still shimmered beneath cold rain and blurred city lights. Inside, the illusion of perfection had finally disappeared. Nathaniel Reed stood alone near the ballroom windows with his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned and his tie loosened slightly at the collar. Federal investigators remained upstairs reviewing financial records while attorneys filled private conference rooms with controlled panic and exhausted conversations. Somewhere down the hall, Victoria Hale was speaking quietly with legal counsel, though nobody looked at her the same way anymore. Respect had vanished faster than fear. Nathaniel rested one hand lightly against the cold glass and stared out over the city below. For years he believed power meant staying ahead of consequences. Tonight, he understood something far more dangerous. Real power belonged to the people who still recognized truth even when it threatened everything comfortable around them. Behind him, the ballroom doors opened softly. Nathaniel turned slightly, expecting Daniel Brooks or another investigator. Instead, he saw Evelyn Carter walking quietly toward the exit in her dark coat, with a small umbrella folded beneath one arm. She no longer wore the black server uniform. Without it, she looked even quieter somehow. Simpler. Yet the entire room still seemed to shift subtly around her presence. Nathaniel stepped away from the window. You were going to leave without saying goodbye. Evelyn adjusted the strap of her bag gently against her shoulder. There did not seem much left to say. Nathaniel looked around the nearly empty ballroom. This room looked different a few hours ago. Evelyn glanced briefly toward the abandoned tables. No, her voice remained soft. It only looked expensive. Nathaniel almost smiled at that. Not because it was amusing, because it was true. For years he had confused elegance with integrity. Tonight, one quiet woman carrying champagne trays separated those ideas forever. He walked slowly toward her while rain tapped softly against the windows behind them. The investigators will uncover everything by morning, he said quietly. Evelyn nodded once. Probably. You do not sound satisfied. She looked at him carefully. Corruption ending should not feel exciting. It should feel overdue. Again, that impossible calmness. Nathaniel realized she never spoke to impress anyone. Every sentence simply arrived honest and unpolished, like something she had already spent years thinking about before tonight ever began. Nearby, a young hotel employee accidentally dropped a silver fork while cleaning one of the tables. The sharp sound echoed briefly through the nearly empty ballroom before disappearing again into silence. Nathaniel lowered his eyes for a moment. Your father deserved better. Evelyn's expression softened faintly. Sadness touched her face again, quiet and restrained. He believed honesty mattered even when it cost him everything. Nathaniel swallowed slowly. I used to believe that too. Evelyn studied him for a long second beneath the fading chandelier light. Then maybe tonight was not entirely wasted. The sentence stayed between them quietly while rain continued sliding across the glass walls surrounding the ballroom. Nathaniel looked toward the small black name tag still resting near the abandoned champagne station. Evelyn Carter. Earlier tonight, it represented someone invisible. Now it felt heavier than every executive title in the building. What happens to you now? He asked softly. Evelyn followed his gaze toward the name tag before answering. Tomorrow morning, I will wake up and find another job. Nathaniel frowned slightly. After everything tonight? A banquet ended, she said calmly. The world keeps moving. Nathaniel looked at her with something close to disbelief. Most people would have demanded recognition. Interviews. Compensation. Public attention. Evelyn seemed interested in none of it. She only wanted the truth acknowledged. Nothing more. You could help rebuild Reed Global, he said quietly. Someone like you belongs inside the company. Evelyn shook her head gently. No, why? She glanced once more around the ballroom. The faded luxury. The abandoned performance. The silence left behind after appearances collapsed. Because people should choose integrity before losing everything, she answered softly. Not after. Nathaniel felt the truth of that sentence settle deep inside him. Painful. Earned. Real. Evelyn opened the umbrella slowly near the exit doors. Then she paused and looked back toward him one final time. My father used to say something, she said quietly. Nathaniel waited. He said the loudest lies are usually spoken in beautiful rooms. Her gray eyes moved briefly across the nearly empty ballroom beneath the dim chandeliers. And sometimes the only honest person is the one nobody bothered noticing. Then she stepped outside into the rain. The doors closed softly behind her. Nathaniel remained standing alone in the ballroom long after she disappeared into the Manhattan night. Around him, workers continued clearing glasses and extinguishing candles table by table until the room slowly darkened into silence. On the marble counter beside the champagne station, Evelyn's old name tag still rested beneath the fading chandelier glow. Nathaniel walked toward it slowly and picked it up carefully in his hand. Such a small thing. Cheap plastic. White letters. Yet somehow it carried more dignity than the entire gala combined. Outside, rain continued falling over the city while the last chandelier above him dimmed quietly into darkness.